Joining us right now, KT McFarland, our national security analyst for Fox News. And what a great time to have you, KT, because there's a whole lot going on outside U.S. borders these days.
Yeah, there sure is.
Well, the president...
Very little of it good, I might add.
Right. The president is at the Vatican City meeting with the Pope today, but earlier in the week he, of course, was attending the G7 meetings. And when asked by Jonathan Karl of ABC News about Russia's role in the world and whether they are our number one geopolitical foe, as Mitt Romney said during the campaign, the president's response caused a lot of commotion. Here was his response.
Russia is a regional power that is threatening some of its immediate neighbors.
KT, you've been telling us for a couple of weeks that one of the ways to deal with Vladimir Putin is to not embarrass him on the international stage. So does this help or hurt?
Well, it just is, it's feckless. I mean, the president makes a bunch of speeches, he lectures, he acts like the tough guy, and then he doesn't deliver a damn thing. I mean, I think that Theodore Roosevelt had it just right when he said, walk softly and carry a big stick. I mean, don't shame them in public, but in private, grab them by the throat and tell them, here's what we're going to do. We're reinforcing our borders, the NATO borders. We're going to rebuild the missile shield in Poland and the Czech Republic. We are going to help the Europeans develop their own energy and sell them our energy, replacing yours. We're going to help the Eastern Europeans get their energy from new pipelines that are going to go to the stands. And by the way, we are going to make sure, I'm going to throw every roadblock in my power in front of having any Western companies develop your energy, Russia, or invest in your other, try to help you diversify your economy. But Obama just it's all sort of a lot of speeches and a few little slaps on the wrist and changing the subject, saying, it's actually, I'm much more worried about nuclear weapons. But the fact of the matter is, Vladimir Putin senses weakness and fecklessness on the part of the American president, yet another sort of threat and red line that nobody believes Obama's going to carry out. So I think Vladimir Putin's decided, I may go all the way. I may try to challenge NATO.
And that's what I wanted to ask you about, because there are some reports this morning that as many as 30,000 Russian troops are massed along the border with Ukraine, and there are some people who are saying that it's beginning to look more likely as if the Russians will try to enter eastern Ukraine. If that happens, what should be the response?
Well, again, it should be the things I've just talked about. The United States may not have a lot we can do now to stop Putin, but we have a lot we could start now that would stop him down the road. And I think that at a minimum we should do the military stuff NATO requires us to do. Let's beef up our NATO forces on the border. Let Putin know that, he may want to do some of this stuff. Ultimately, it'll come at a great risk. Now, he may still do it, and he may call our bluff. I think he probably will call our bluff. But I don't think he should get away with this without some sense that he is going to have to pay a major price, more than just sort of Obama shaming him in public and calling him, ooh, you're so 19th century, the rest of us are in the 21st century.
Do you think he will, by the way? Do you think he will invade eastern Ukraine?
I don't know. I mean, the people who know probably aren't talking, and the people who are talking probably don't know. He certainly is putting him in the position that he could make that decision. On the other hand, he might just wait, because Ukraine falls into his lap. Probably what he wants, Eastern Ukraine, probably falls into his lap eventually anyway. Ukraine is an economic basket case. Now, the International Monetary Fund has talked about giving it a very major boost of about $17 billion, but that will come at a price that the Ukrainian politicians may not be willing to pay, which is corruption reform, good government, austerity on the part of the Ukrainian people. So it may well be that Ukraine looks around to say, or Eastern Ukraine says, it's not so bad in Crimea. We've got a lot of stuff the Russians might want. Maybe it's better for us to make an accommodation with Russia rather than hoping Barack Obama makes good on his latest red line.
KT McFarland, I've been dying to ask you this question. The president yesterday in his major speech said that this showdown in Ukraine will not lead to a new Cold War. I don't know if he has a whole lot to say about that. And they keep speaking about the Cold War in the 80s with this disdain and this sort of smugness. You were there at the highest levels during the Cold War. I mean, was the Cold War so bad, really? I mean, we fought that Cold War in a very effective way, and it was a good thing in the long run.
Well, there was much more certainty to it. You kind of knew what everybody was going to do. What Reagan understood, though, was that the Soviet Union, the Soviet Empire's greatest weakness was its economy, and therefore he sectored in on that. He made sure that we had American defenses that were built up, and made sure that we were sort of at the cutting edge of research and development, as well as building up our armed forces, our personnel, and our weaponry. But at the same time, he understood that Russia, without high energy prices, high oil prices particularly, would collapse. So he maneuvered things around so that energy prices ultimately did go down. They went from $40 a barrel to $18 a barrel in 9 months, and it left the Soviet Union on its knees. I mean, they were facing the inability to feed their people if they didn't import wheat. They didn't have enough money to buy wheat. So what could Obama do? He could understand that same vulnerability and press for it and do what Putin's done, which is to play the long game. Putin's outsmarted him at every single step, and Obama should not just man up in the sense of, deliver on some of his threats with the NATO, with the missile shield, et cetera, but deliver on some of his threats with sanctions.
And in the meantime, it doesn't look like the president, in fairness, is going to get any help from Europe. They don't seem to be. They don't have any willingness to fight the good fight here.
No, they don't. And I think the worry that I have is if Putin decides, maybe this is my moment, I'll never be in a better position.
Yeah.
Europe is weak economically, Obama's a feckless and indecisive president, and my power on the world stage depends on my economic ability to export high-priced natural gas to Europe, and high-priced oil to the world, and that may be slipping over time, so maybe this is my moment.
Yeah.
If you look at Article 5 of the NATO Treaty, it says that an armed aggression against any one country will be considered, all will come to the defense. Well, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, the Baltic states are NATO members, but look at that word armed. Maybe they don't even have to do an armed assault. Maybe they just do it with political intimidation and economic blackmail.
Wow.
But you're right. Putin is probably looking at this in a very different way. It might be his moment to act, and if there's nothing there to push back, then he just has his way.
Well, and look what would happen if NATO, let those countries go, the Baltic states,
right,
sort of decide they're back in Russia's orbit. That really would test the integrity and validity of NATO, and it would look pretty hollow. So at that point, maybe all of Europe decides, our economic interests maybe do reside with East-West trade, Germany, Russia, Western Europe, and so maybe less with the United States. I just think it's a diminution of American power throughout the world. And, the problem is we have all the good cards, and we're not playing any of them. Russia has all the bad cards, and they're playing them so well.
KT McFarland, Fox News national security analyst. Always a pleasure to have you on a weekly basis. Thank you, KT.